Look at this I made. Hello, and welcome to part 5 of my 3800 swap series. Now in the last episode, I went through and resealed this whole engine, and installed new timing components. And now that our motor has been refreshed, it's time to put a transmission on this thing and take care of the last few things to get this motor ready to go in the car. So let's get fucking started. To begin, it's finally time to take this engine off the engine stand. It's been a long time coming. This is a pretty cool moment for me, but that's enough sentiment. Now let me show you this junk I rigged up. As you see, we got the screwdriver there, the 2 bolts with no washers through the chain here, other bolt with no washer here, and then how about midway up these random studs? How's that sound? She ain't going nowhere, buddy. Alright, enough fun and games. Now that I've got this motor all chained up, let's conjoin these chains with a carabiner and get her lifted. Now we can't just throw this carabiner anywhere. The location does matter. Like I said earlier, we want an even distribution of pulling force, so we kind of want to try to get even tension on all these chains so that way our motor sits flat when it's getting lifted. And as you can see here, I'm just kind of hand checking to make sure that all these chains are evenly distributing the force, which we won't be exactly able to tell till the motor is off the stand, but it's a good eyeball. Yep, be a little crazy in here. And crazy it is. Time to finally see what she's gonna do. Here goes nothing. Okay. That went surprisingly well. Yeah. Beautiful. Now that we have the engine off the engine stand, we get full access to this back cover, which allows us to take care of a few more of the remaining gaskets. We'll be able to replace our gasket for this cover, as well as our rear main seal. First things first, let's take this cover off. Alright, as you can see, I've went ahead and taken out all these bolts here. They were all 10 millimeters. And keep in mind, if you have your oil pan on, there are also 2 10 millimeters down here as well that need to come out. And then this should just come right off like that. And be aware if you have RTV on your oil pan down here too, because you might have to replace that. Mine does not. But just always check this gasket. You don't want any rips or tears or else you got to replace it. Anyways, let's keep moving on and I'll explain some of this to you in a second. Another good tip too is I laid out my hardware in the exact format that it was on the engine. And I did it specifically because these bolts, as you can see, have little rubber grommets on them, which locate the this cover piece. So you want to make sure that the rubber pieces are correlated to the correct bolt hole, just in case of possible wear or whatever, just to be safe. But let's keep moving. Alright, so first things first here, I'm going to clean off this gasket surface. And before you do that, if you look down here, you can see that oil returns into the oil pan through these little holes. So I'm going to make sure that I cover these or fill these with some sort of cloth or just anything to keep contaminants out of your oil pan. You absolutely do not want any contaminants down there. So let me get that going and I'll show you. As you can see, nothing too crazy here. Just covered up those holes with some shop towels, and then I'm going to want to grab an razor blade and some brake clean and just cleaning these surfaces off. Same for this as well here. Get this old gasket off and make sure everything is clean and down to bare metal. Alright, so as you can see here, we got the surface pretty clean, not too shabby, and you can see all the gunk that these caught, so I'm glad I put those down there. And now I'm working on getting the gasket off of this surface and also taking this gasket out here. So I'm just taking a razor blade, running it around the inside of here, as you can see, just trying to get that off. So I will show you when I'm done with that. Alright, now that we have those mating surfaces clean, let's move on to the next step, which is replacing this rear main seal. It's always good to replace these when you have your motor out. However, they can be slightly tricky to remove as, first off, they're press fit, and second off, the race that they sit in is very, very fragile, and oil will seep out if you damage it at all. So just be careful not to scrape or nick it while you're working on it. And as you can see, my preferred method here is just simply a screwdriver and a hammer. Just hit it with your purse and it should come out. Carefully, of course. It's Louis Vuitton. As you can see, I got this most of the way out here. Another thing that I found that helped me is I put a little PB blaster on the edge here just so it can give you a little bit of lubricant and break away that surface. So I'll finish getting this out and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, and here we are. Got that thing out. So make sure to check your surfaces on the inside here. Make sure there's no like major scrapes or corrosion or anything. I'll probably wind up taking some brake clean and maybe even some like high grit sandpaper just to get this little corrosion ring off around here. I'll just be very careful with this surface as oil will leak if you put any damage on it. So I'm going to do that and I'll show you what's next. Alright, now as you guys can see here, I got that new seal in. And let me just explain to you how I did it. So I don't have like a hydraulic press or anything. So I wound up taking a little bit of engine oil, put it around the perimeter of this thing, and then I started it on there, and then I found this little flat piece here, and I put the two in this vise and just clamped them together. It didn't go perfectly like smooth, so I had to rotate it a few times. But when I'm getting it in, I just pressed it flush to the back here, as you can see, and that should do the job. So let's get this reinstalled. All right, so as you can see here, I have the cover back on, and the bolts are just snugged up. So what I found online is that you can go to 16 foot-pounds, or you can do the German method, the Gutentight. That's probably what I'm gonna do. Just tighten them down with the ratchet, call it a day. Nothing too crazy. 16 foot-pounds is pretty trivial, so as long as you just put a little elbow grease on it, it shouldn't go anywhere. But yeah, I'm gonna finish that up and we'll keep moving. One other thing too that I wanted to note, make sure to do this in a crisscross pattern when you go through this. You know, you want to evenly tighten these. You don't want the start at the bottom and then go up, because then it will like kind of fold it on. If you can get it to like kind of radiate outwards, that's much better. It's just for the longevity of the metal. It's nothing too crazy. I mean, you can do it that way, but it doesn't hurt. Now, let's do something cool. Let's put a clutch and flywheel on this John. And I guess this kind of spoils the transmission I'm going with here. So, surprise, we're doing a manual swap. Now, this may sound tricky, but it's actually pretty straightforward, and there's a lot of aftermarket support for this, surprisingly. So let me explain what we got going on here. Now, I don't know if you remember the name Fiero from the last episode, but he made our bracket set for us. Turns out he also makes flywheels, specifically for a 3800 manual swap Fiero. So we gave that boy a ring, and here's what we got. That is a beautiful piece of metal. Milled down and machine balanced. Fiero Rog, you dirty dog, you've done it again. Let's throw this thing out. Alright, so first things first. Since this is a balanced flywheel, it can actually only go on in one orientation. And finding that orientation may be a little difficult. You just kind of got to turn it until all the holes line up. Once I found out the orientation for mine, I marked one of the holes. This way, now I have a visual way to orient it besides just the bolt pattern. The next step is to get our flywheel bolts. And it's not quite as simple as it sounds, because these 3800 motors never came in manual transmission, so we have to use an aftermarket application. But thankfully, Dirty Dog Rog pulled back through again, and he gave us a part number. Which, interesting fact, both the bolts and the flywheel are for 90s Camaro. The flywheel is just machined down and balanced. Some people even do it themselves. But now that we have our hardware figured out, let's put this thing on. Now let me show you how we torqued it. And here are the torque specs. You know, just free ball it. So let's say this is 0. Oh, I see the issue here. Hang on now. Yeah, I'm a bit of a dumbass, but it's alright, because old reliable trial and error came in and saved my. So let me show you what I rigged up. I just want to put a big breaker bar on the crank pulley. And since the crankshaft also attaches to the flywheel, this should do the trick. Just make sure you got it facing the right direction. And now she's all torqued down. One last thing I forgot to mention, these bolts also require blue thread locker. Now it's time to talk clutches. This is my Spec Stage 3 Plus clutch kit. This is probably the most recommended clutch I got for this job. And honestly, Spec's website is pretty straightforward, so finding yourself one shouldn't be too hard. Now let's install this kit. First, we'll put our clutch in our clutch alignment tool, and then we'll spline it right into the engine. And just make sure once it's in that it is properly aligned. We don't want this thing wobbling at all. Next, it's time for our pressure plate. This will sit right over our clutch, and then we're just going to bolt it to the flywheel. And actually, I want to talk about the hardware real quick. First things first, just don't reuse old hardware. Bad idea. And as you can see here, that's exactly what I did. And when I went to torque it, it immediately snapped off inside the flywheel. Nice. I wound up having to take this to a shop to get a nut welded on it because I couldn't get it out when I drilled it or used an easy out. But allow me to teach you from my mistakes. Here's the correct hardware and the correct torque specs. Don't do what I did. Next, we're gonna move on to this, the pilot bearing, or the, there's some fucking dumb name for it. This goes in the transmission, so I'll show you this real quick. This is a throwout bearing, not a pilot bearing. Alright, so let's take you inside the bell housing here. So we have our, engage and disengage arm. This engages and disengages the clutch from the flywheel. And on this, there is a little bearing right here. As you can see, same thing. And if you look in here, it just rotates off. Like the way it's hooked in, there's a thing on the back here, and the front here, so it should just rotate right off and slide right out, just like that. Nothing crazy. The new one is just gonna go on the exact same way. There we go, it is on, and now we can put the transmission onto the engine. Alright, so as soon as we got this together, I'm going to try to put this transmission on. So first things first, we're going to pull this alignment tool out. So now everything is sitting in place, and then we're going to grab the transmission in 1 second. This is going to be a oh yeah. We're having fun today. Oh shit. I don't know if we're going to do this or not. I'm sure it's going to try my ass off. Alright, so surprisingly, this wasn't too bad. Just went on, clicked right into place. Throw some bolts in the bell housing and call it good. Alright, so here's where stuff's gonna get interesting. So now we have everything put together over here. It is time to put it on the cradle. So, I gotta figure this out because this crane is huge. I think what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna set this back down on the tire, send this arm as far out as possible so I can get the engine in front of the crane, and then I'm just gonna hope and pray that the crane will lift it without bending, and we're gonna try and set it in place on the motor mounts. So let's see what we can do here. Which quickly, before I mount this, I just wanna talk about the cradle. Alright, so here's our engine cradle. I've already kind of went through and cleaned it up. So my next step is I'm going to put in new mounts. These are transmission mounts. I should do a motor mount. I'm not going to because I couldn't find one, to be honest with you. This one isn't really that bad. So replace these mounts, and then we're going to put the engine on it. Shouldn't be too bad. And keep in mind, all these mounts on the cradle currently are stock Fiero 2.8 mounts. And that's what our Fiero ROG bracket set is going to mount up to. And on a side note, as you can see in the background, I'm tipping this cradle up. It makes life a lot easier to get the motor mounts on and off. If you have the engine off and your wheels on, might as well try it. Well, I guess it's time to finally put this engine and transmission on the cradle for good. Just gotta swing this big old thing around here first. Dang thing's wider than a big body Buick. Alright, as you can see, we've got the two pretty close together here. So it's just kind of a matter of finagling it and getting it in place. I'm probably gonna want to move the cradle around just a little bit. This part can be kind of a bit, so just take your time, move slow, be careful. It's heavy, it's dangerous, just be smart. Now this part may take some time, as getting everything lined up and in place is not easy. It takes a skilled hand. But just be patient, watch your fingers, and don't be afraid to give her a little gas. Sometimes it takes a little extra elbow grease to get these things done right. Okay, let's see the predicament here. So, this mount is way the f off, but it'll rotate and get in there soon. It's actually not that far off, it's close. This one here, very close, and this one back here, I just got set in place. I don't know if you can see in there or not. But I'm gonna get the bolt, or the nut on that, so I can hold it down, and I'm gonna try to spin this and get the rest of it aligned. So we're super close. As you can see here, this front motor mount is super close. I'm gonna see if I can just finagle it with my hand real quick. Oh, damn. There we go, that one's in. Success. All right, here's my last mount. So with the Fiero, it's a little complicated. You don't know which one is gonna go in exactly. There's two alignment holes, and I put it in the first one, and that one is not working. So I gotta figure out how the I'm gonna get this back off, move it over, and get it back in. So wish me luck. All right, and as you can see, after that move here, it went right into place. So we are all connected. So now it's time to disconnect the crane here from the engine, and then we can keep moving. Oh boy, are we making progress on this thing. Let's just pop all this rigging off and we can finally take a look at it. Gee dang, there she is. Golly, that's an incredible feeling. We break from your regularly scheduled broadcasting for a puppy break. We now return you to your regularly scheduled broadcasting. Now, although we have everything mounted on the cradle, there's still a few parts I want to put on this motor. To begin, here's a new starter. This is just a stock starter for the 3800 that I got off Rock Auto. And there's only 2 bolts into the block and then she's on. The next part I want to replace are axle seals. There's just 2 ground mounts on each side of the transmission output, and this should just pop out and pop right back in. Emphasis on should. And always remember to clean your surfaces. A little brake clean and a rag goes a long way. And here's our new seals. We're just going to grease them up and put them in. And like I always say, please use gloves, don't be like me. One other helpful trick to get these seals in is to find a socket that fits just around the outside diameter of this, so that way you can apply an even pressure when you tap it in. And also putting a little grease on the transmission output race will go a long way. Next, we'll just tap the seal into place. Bellissimo. Next, let's move on to the exhaust. Nothing too crazy here, just going to slap some new gaskets on for that ZZP kit. However, in order to put this on, we gotta take it apart. We'll just split at the crossover pipe here. But before we put those gaskets on, we gotta peel this tape off and clean the surface. Just like I mentioned in the last episode, this tape's here because, well, I painted the engine for one, but for two, I'm also trying to keep it sealed, since I wasn't working on it for a while. But now we're working on it, so let's get this junk off. Alright, and now with that tape off and the surface clean, we can throw gaskets and the exhaust on. And now you can kind of see why we split this exhaust in half earlier. The space it fits through above the transmission and underneath the supercharger is pretty tight, so we kind of gotta wiggle it through here. And now we can start some bolts. And another teaching from my mistakes. Don't use your impact. These bolts are really prone to snapping, and I did snap one, so just do it with the ratchet, go slow, take your time. Next, we'll just throw the other log on. And one thing to keep in mind here is the oil dipstick actually passes between two runners, so just keep that in mind. And here's a better view of that dipstick. But let's just hit this with the impact, and then we'll have our manifolds on. And next, we actually have to remove the crossover pipe, as the EGR sits behind it. And I know you can delete the EGR system, but I'm just trying to keep mine as stock as possible. I just want it to run smooth, like factory. Just a few bolts and we're golden. Now we'll just throw a crossover pipe back on, and there's our whole exhaust system. Last thing I want to take care of here is the fuel rails. Well, since I've been off, they actually wound up getting damaged a little bit. Let me show you. Well, more specifically, the injectors got damaged. But don't worry, it's repairable. If you can see the end of these injectors here, there's those little brown rings. Those are called pintle caps. And they're pretty important. They actually direct the flow of the fuel. And as you can see, mine look beat. So I got a kit to replace them. As well as the O-rings. Now it's pretty straightforward, but I can't lie. The pintle caps are a little scarier. They're pretty thin and pretty hard and brittle plastics. You gotta be really careful when you put them on. But they should just pop into place. Just like so. Voila. So I just went ahead and did all of them. Doesn't it look so much better? Now let's put this thing on the engine. It just sets on there, and then there's a few bolts to secure it down. And there she is. Now this motor is just about ready to roll back underneath that car. And I'm just going to leave this right here. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. As always, thank you for watching.